Okay, let's move on to 15.4, which is over communication in the information age. Now, multi-communication represents the use of technology to participate in several interactions at the same time. Digital communication technology in the workplace is the use of email, texting, Facebook, and Twitter, which may influence the content of our communication. Researchers found that peers rate each other differently depending on the medium they use, with people being far more likely to trash their colleagues via email than filling out a paper form. In one organization, employees with the most extensive personal digital networks were found to be 7% more productive, but those with the most cohesive face-to-face networks were 30% more productive. Now, sometimes you'll hear that, millennials, which are anyone born from like 1977 to 1997 are called the always-on generation because they're accustomed to spending about 8 hours a day looking at various screens, such as cell phones, computers, and TVs. Now, for the young I generation, which is that generation that followed the millennials, technology is simply a part of their DNA. They watch the smallest amount of TV but spend the most time text messaging and watching the most online video. Now, in a couple of years, millennials will account for nearly half the employees in the world. Their outlook is having a profound impact on the workplace, bringing new approaches to collaboration, knowledge sharing, and innovation in business and governments. Now, millennials exhibit a thirst for instant gratification and quick fixes and problems with focus and dimensioned attention spans. I'm sure you can understand why. They place a strong emphasis on finding work that is personally fulfilling. Now let's talk a little bit about digital communication and the new workplace, which uses video conferencing, telecommuting, and teleworking. Now, video conferencing or teleconferencing uses video and audio links along with the computers to enable people located at different locations in the world to see, hear, and talk with one another. Using video conferencing can significantly reduce travel expenses. However, one study found that when a company reduced its travel budget for meetings, it loses both revenue and profits. Now, many organizations use sophisticated equipment known as telepresence technology, which are high-def video conference systems that stimulate face-to-face meeting between users. Now, telecommuting involves doing work that is generally performed in the office, away from the office, using a variety of different information technologies. Some of the benefits of telecommuting are reduction of your capital costs, an increased flexibility and autonomy for your workers, a competitive edge in recruiting those hard-to-get employees because they can work from home. You can get an increased productivity, and perhaps the ability to tap non-traditional labor pools. Now, about 24% of rural businesses and 35% of non-rural businesses in the U.S. currently employ people to telecommute or telework from home. Telecommuting is more common for jobs that involve computer work, writing, and phone or brain work that requires concentration and limited interruptions. Now, the downside of our digital age. Security, guarding against cyber threats. Security is defined as a system of safeguards for protecting information technology against disasters, system failures, and unauthorized access that results in damage or loss. The key to protecting digital systems is prevention. Let's talk about privacy, which kind of keeping things to yourself. Privacy is the right of people not to reveal information about themselves. A particularly aggravating violation of privacy is identity theft. And you probably hear about this happening all the time in the news. And this is in which thieves hijack your name and identity and use your good credit rating to cash or buy things. Those individuals that are between the ages of 18 to 29 have been found to be more likely than holders of social networks to keep an eye on their online profiles and who accesses them. Now, email, or what's more formally known as electronic mail, uses the internet to send computer-generated text documents between people. Now, there are 3 drawbacks to email. There's a decrease in all other forms of communicating among coworkers. Emotions are often poorly communicated or miscommunicated via email messages. And the greater use of email, the less connected coworkers reportedly feel. Now, here are some tips for better email handling. These are from the text table 15.7, you see some of these, such as avoid sloppiness, but avoid criticizing other sloppiness. Kind of avoids, the spelling and grammatical errors, but don't criticize errors in others' messages. It could come back to haunt you later. And not every topic belongs on an email. Complicated topics may be better discussed one-on-one, such as using the phone or in person, to avoid any type of misunderstandings. As I noted earlier, some of those emotions just aren't conveyed well in an email, and it's best to, if you think there's a chance for conflict, try to avoid that and go through the right approach, and email may not be that approach. Another part of technology here that we're seeing more and more of here in the 21st century is that of the smartphones, and there's both use and abuse for the smartphones. Smartphones are so widespread that there was one survey that reported those respondents to the survey said they would rather give up their landline phones, TV, and internet than surrender their mobile phones. And I myself am guilty of this. I have my smartphone with me all the time because it's such a fast way of communication. Now, smartphone problems range from annoying tones and conversations to unethical and illegal actions to even deadly, such as distracting drivers on the road. And your book has a table which shows many tips for handling the use of smartphones. If you take a look at that now, you can see some of those rules for using the smartphones. Keep the volume of your voice down while on the phone. There's definitely no need to shout. I see this all the time. Whether it's just an individual trying to emphasize a point or if they just feel that people can't hear them as well, I don't know, but definitely there's no need to ever shout. Don't force defenseless others on buses, restaurants, and so forth to listen to your phone conversations if it's something that can be done later. Obviously, don't text during meetings or other conversations. Make sure you have that engagement so that the communication isn't broke down, so that the sender, the message, and the receiver all work in a good flow. Obviously, you see this posted everywhere, you hear it on the radio, see it on TV, don't dial or text while driving. Next in the chapter, we talked about social media, both the pros and cons. Now, social media are an internet-based and mobile technologies used to generate interactive dialogue with members in that network. 2/3 of online adults in the U.S. use different social media platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and stuff like that. Now, social media enables businesses to connect in a real time and over distances with customers, suppliers, employees, potential talent, and other various key stakeholders. Social media have also become contributors to what's known as crowdsourcing, which is the practice of obtaining needed services, ideas, or content by soliciting contributions from a large group of people, and especially from the online community. Now, there are some drawbacks to social media, and one of that is distraction. Obviously, as you're trying to keep up, you're going to be distracted from other duties. And you might know some people that have a great level of distraction because they're constantly checking their smartphone, checking their social media. Another drawback to social media is leaving the wrong impression through ill-advised tweets or posts. And then unfortunately, I see this with several people, that the drawback to using social media so much is they're replacing real conversations with that kind of short text or short type conversations. I'm sure you see all kinds of acronyms being used all over the place. And even if you're reading someone's email or whatever, you might notice, hey, this is not real professional because they're using social media type lingo and abbreviated messages. Alright, and then last we move into 15.5, which is over improving communication effectiveness. Now, the principal activities that managers spend their time doing are listening, reading, writing, and speaking. All those involve communication. Now, let's talk about being an effective listener. Now, people comprehend only about 35% of a typical verbal message. Although we can process up to like 500 words per minute, the average speaker communicates just 125 words per minute. Active listening is the process of actively decoding and interpreting those verbal messages. And it requires the full attention and processing of information. Now, to improve your active listening skills, you should try to determine your 2 or 3 dominant listening styles. First one is the appreciative style. This is listening to be amused. An appreciative listener listens for pleasure. You can just think of this as easy listening. The empathetic style. This is tuning in to the speaker's emotions. An empathetic listener focuses on the speaker's feelings. And lastly, the comprehensive style is focusing on the speaker's logic. So a comprehensive listener tries to determine the rationale of the speaker's argument, preferring logical presentations without interruptions. Next we have the discerning style. This is focusing on the main message. A discerning listener tries to determine the speaker's main message and important points, oftentimes taking notes while listening. Now the evaluative style, this is kind of like challenging the speaker. An evaluative listener listens analytically, all the while formulating challenges to the speaker's points and asking lots of questions. Effective listening is a learned skill, and it takes energy and desire to develop it. Basically, it comes down to paying attention to the content of the message. Next, we talk about becoming an effective reader. Reading shares many of the same skills as listening. Concentrating on the message, judging the content, not the delivery, and concentrating on the main ideas. And there are other strategies as well. Realize that speed doesn't work. Or realize that speed reading doesn't work. Speed reading can lead to problems with dense or unfamiliar material. Learn to streamline reading. Be savvy about periodicals and books, review magazines and newspaper subscriptions, and eliminate as many as possible. Transfer your reading load. Ask employees to screen material first and then post an action note on each item. Lastly, make internal memos and emails more efficient. Ask others to tell you upfront in their emails, memos, and reports what they want you to do so that there's no breakdown in the communication. You can do a top-down reading, or SQ3R, which involves 5 steps. Rate reasons to read, question and predict answers, survey the big picture, skim for main ideas, and then summarize. And you can see that all kind of broke down right here in table 15.11 in your text. Here is the whole method just kind of written out so you can really visualize and absorb the SQ3R top-down reading method. Now we'll look at being an effective writer. Writing has become an essential management skill, as email has replaced telephone calls, and even upper-level executives do their own correspondence in today's business. Tips for writing more effectively are as follows. Don't show your ignorance. Use the spelling checkers and grammar checkers built into word processing programs. These can help you in all facets of life. Read and proofread your writing before sending it on. One thing to do here is not only read it, but also say it out loud. If you read it out loud, you might hear something out of the ordinary that you wouldn't notice if you were just skimming over something that you just wrote. Understand your strategy before you write. Most important to least important, which is useful when the action you want the reader to take is logical and not highly political. Least controversial to most controversial. Best used when the decision is controversial. And negative to positive. This establishes a common ground when your reader and puts the positive argument last. Start with your purpose. Start by stating your purpose and what you expect of the reader. Next, write simply, concisely, and directly. Keep your words simple. Use short words, sentences, and phrases, but make sure they're complete thoughts. Be direct and use the active rather than the passive. And then telegraph your writing with a powerful layout. Make your writing as easy to read as possible. When we talk about highlighting, use bold and italics to highlight key concepts and introduce new concepts, and bullets to emphasize listed items. And if you don't know yet, now I'll say it out loud. Don't use all capital letters for emphasis. This is construed as being rude when you text or type with all capital letters. With white space, wide margins, and breaks between paragraphs, use these to produce a clean and attractive page. If you're simply near the end and you're getting ready to start a new section, it might be wise to use a page break. Having really wide margins can just be distracting, and having too much white space can be distracting. And we will conclude here with being an effective speaker. An important skill is the ability to make an oral presentation to a room of people. And one study found that the top predictor of success is how much you enjoy public speaking and how effective you are at it. The biggest problem most people have with public speaking is controlling their nerves. One author suggests preparing your nerves by practicing your speech until it's near perfect, visualizing yourself performing with brilliance, getting reassurance from a friend or a coworker, getting to the speaking site early is a great tip, and releasing physical tension by doing deep breathing exercises prior to giving your speech. Now, there are 3 simple rules for a speech. First one, tell them what you're going to say. The introduction should take 5 to 15% of your speaking time. Try to go right to the point of what you're wanting to speak about. The second step, or the second rule, is just say it. The main body of the speech takes up about 75 to 90% of your time. Choose 3 or 4 points you want the audience to remember. Constantly provide your listeners with guidelines and transitional phrases so that they see the connection between topics. And then lastly, tell them what you said. For the end, about 5 to 10% of your time, you need a solid, strong, persuasive wrap-up to the entire presentation. Use a signal phrase to indicate any type of conclusion, such "that's all I have for now," or "that concludes our presentation," something to that effect. And end with a call to action, a thought of the day, or a story or a quotation, just to leave the audience with some good information. And on that note, I will end my speaking with you this week in talking about Chapter 15 over interpersonal organizational communication. Hopefully you learned a lot from this and the whole information flow, communication process, and that'll do it for this week. So thank you guys for joining along, and hopefully I'll see you in Chapter 16. Thank you.